Hello, hello. Welcome to the Mayor's Office. The year is currently 2023 in Pacifica as I sit here. Therefore, I am Mayor Tygarjas Twyrls Bigstyck, and I welcome you to my office. So tonight's theme is making a new friend. Much as one of my other friends whom I refer to, my new friend is a very busy gentleman. And I was thinking it's often the case that I introduce my friends so often, this show might as well be called Tygarjas and Friends. But in this instance, it's somebody who I don't know quite as well as the folk I usually bring on, but who I am forming a relationship with rather quickly. But this is a new friend, and not just to myself, but also to all of Pacifica. So because I do want to jump right into it without too much ado, here is a State Assembly member of the Fightin' 23rd Assembly District, Marc Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Bigstyck. Good to be here.
Good to have you. Welcome. Thank you for making the journey out to Pacifica to chit-chat here in the studio.
It's my pleasure. You know, any day that I make it to Pacifica is a good day. Any day that I make it to the coast side is a good day. So thank you for giving me another reason to come out.
My pleasure. I'll tell you, I feel almost exactly the same. Which is to say I have many good days.
You do have many good days. I'm jealous.
So I wanted to basically give you a little bit more time to say hi to Pacifica, and I wanted to give them a little insight into what it looks like to form a new relationship. And it's really important to me that I'm kind of putting onto a camera a realistic snapshot of what friendship and relationship building looks like within the context of what we do, which I feel like is the least of what people often get to see, especially depending on which news outlet they've chosen to plug into.
Yeah, it's the relationships. And, you know, I've been fortunate to represent Pacifica for 10 months now. This is my 7th year in the Assembly, but only my first year representing Pacifica. And so, relationships with you, your colleagues on the council, the city staff, have been so important in representing you in Sacramento, right? Which is my job, and I can't do that effectively unless we develop relationships and I develop a deeper understanding of Pacifica, which is a very unique community, and that's one of the things that I love about it, is how different it is than Menlo Park or Palo Alto or Saratoga or other communities that I represent. So it's so important for me to come out here more often and for you to feel comfortable reaching out as you do whenever the need arises to educate me about the community and the issues that are important to it.
And I appreciate that when I reach out, you're very responsive. And as somebody who I know is remarkably busy, you also have aides who, you have a specific regional person who is really also even more responsive because she's designated to take care of us and catch you up on what you need to when you can't be here personally. Elise Lester, of course, I'm referring to, who, by the way, prior to this made a point to indicate that perhaps I give her a shout out the way I did Anthony Yoshida when Josh Becker was on the show. And I must say I'm a little chagrined that Elise is not here. And so Elise, when you are watching this, this is your shout out, but I wish you were here in person.
It's different in person, but hopefully we'll get Elise out here soon. Actually, Elise comes out every weekend.
She really does. She surfs here.
She loves to surf here. She talks about surfing as much as she talks about any other hobby that she has, and so that's another reason why she's so excited. So Elise, the next time you're out in Pacifica, give the mayor a call, and he'll give you a shout out in person. But you're missed. You're missed here, even though you're in our minds and our hearts.
And joking aside, it's truly charming that she lives in Pleasanton, and she schlepped out here to surf long before she was ever your staffer, is my understanding.
Yeah, that's right.
She really does show up just perpetually.
Yeah.
Every time. We had a groundbreaking for the Water District's water tank, and there she was.
I love it.
Every time there's anything, with or without you, she's there. She's making sure to follow up on whatever those topics are. And all this is to say you have chosen very well your staff.
Oh, good. I love to hear. And that's so important for me because I'm in Sacramento so much, right? I'm in Sacramento about a third of the year. And so when I'm there, it's so important for me to have my team be out in the community representing me, being me at all of those events. That's the field representative part of the job. Another part is casework, which they also do. But at least, it helps when the field rep loves the community, and that is very clear with Pacifica and with Elise. So it's a good match.
And the rest of your staff too, I'm fairly familiar with Mila and Leslie and
Pablo, and exactly. Pablo doesn't come up to Pacifica as often.
Not as often.
He's represents me in San Jose, in Campbell, and some other communities, and so that's the diversity of the district. I mean, my district, the 23rd, the fight in 23rd, I like that, goes all the way from Pacifica in the northwest down to a small portion of San Jose. All the way down to the south, and Campbell.
Wow.
And so, it's a very diverse, geographically diverse.
It's not a small strip of land.
It is not. It is not. I used to represent from Half Moon Bay to Sunnyvale, and then after redistricting, the district went further south and further north. And so it keeps me in the car. But, it also... I'm lucky. I have colleagues who represent like 8 blocks of Los Angeles, right? I mean, just smaller geographic areas that aren't as diverse in terms of the communities and their needs. I'm lucky that I get to represent, the heart of Silicon Valley, but also, 40 miles of San Mateo County coast. And so, that maybe 30 miles of San Mateo County coast. And so that's a really neat experience for me and for my team to dive into a breadth of issues that a lot of my other colleagues don't necessarily have to worry about.
It's the cure for myopic sight in you. And, I've spent enough time with you now that I know that your breadth of understanding on a diverse number of issues is really impressive. And by having such a diverse span of space to represent, I would think that in a pleasant way, it actually informs that breadth of understanding in a way that
1,000%.
hopefully would be enjoyable.
Yeah, it's for me, for someone who I am interested in everything. Having a district that forces me to be involved in a lot of different issues is perfect. It's a great fit, and it also keeps it, interesting and fun. And there's almost no bill that comes across my desk that isn't important to some community in my district, and so that makes the job a lot more enjoyable as well.
So I was talking to one of my coworkers, and I said, "So I know you're somebody who generally is utterly disinterested in government in general. So I'm having Assemblyman on my show, and what do you think is a question I should ask him as somebody who's completely disinterested?" To which she responded, "Well, why don't you start with, what does he do?"
Yeah.
So that's the question from my coworker. What does an assembly member do?
That's such a real question. You tell people you're an assembly member, and they ask, "What do you assemble?" It's a legitimate question.
No,
and so,
when I became a new council member, I would talk to people like, "Okay, cool. What does that mean?"
Yeah. And the vast majority of folks, they're busy working, they're busy with family, they're busy with hobbies. They don't have the time or the bandwidth or sometimes the interest and knowing all the different layers of government. And so, half of when I was first running for assembly and knocking on doors, making a lot of phone calls to voters, half of it was civics education and educating people about what assembly members or state senators do. And so what we do essentially is we assemble laws, right? We craft legislation and we try to bills and try to get our colleagues to vote for them to create new laws for California. And so I'd say that's 50% of my job. 50% of my job is the work in Sacramento, trying to come up with new laws to make my constituents' lives better or easier, depending on the constituent and the issue. The other half is helping constituents when they're struggling with state government. And it'll come as no surprise that people struggle a lot with state government. During the COVID pandemic, people struggled with our employment development department and getting their unemployment insurance that they rightfully were owed based on their years of work. The DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles, is a state agency. Caltrans, having to do with state roads. So when people are struggling to get the services that they need from state government, they call us and they say, "Hey, I'm struggling with this department or with this issue. How can you help?" half the time, probably, what they're calling about has nothing to do with state government.
Right.
But so we point them in the direction of their federal elected official, their congress member up here in ASU, or we point them to local government, their mayor, or county government, their supervisor, if it's a different issue. So the one thing that I'd say to constituents is, if you're struggling with government and you don't know what level of government it is, call me. Call my office. I don't have the phone number memorized, but we'll get it to you. But call the office, and if it's
in point of fact, by the way, we can have them put up the phone number.
Perfect.
In post, so
Perfect.
By now, it's probably showing on the screen.
I love is the amazingness of technology.
Absolutely.
But make sure to give us a call, and then we will either help you directly, or if what you're calling about doesn't have to do with state government, we'll connect you with whatever the right government agency is, or level of government elected official is, so that you can get the help that you need, because that's the other 50% of what we do. And I emphasize to my staff, and my staff knows it and they internalize it. 50% of it is the job in Sacramento, but 50% of it is the job back in the district, helping constituents who need help. And those are equally important priorities. So that's something that I believe in very strongly.
Very cool. So I'm going to kind of do this pendulum swing thing that I like to do.
All right, you keep me on my toes.
And so, like, on the one hand, thank you for answering her first question, what does an assembly member do? The other question she had, and this is where the pendulum kind of goes in this other direction, what's your favorite color?
Oh, when I was growing up, it was turquoise. Turquoise, a mix of kind of bluish green. I think it's maybe morphed more to the blue and less to the green as I've gotten a little bit older, but somewhere in that kind of spectrum, somewhere in that palette.
I can remember being as a kid, like watching the sunset and watching the sky turn these various shades of blue on its way to turning to night.
Yeah.
And there was like just this one shade of blue, and it just caught me in this way, and I'm like, yes, this feels like I just opened up into existence.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. I don't know that I've had that kind of existential of an experience, and I'm jealous. And now I'm going to seek that. But I love to scuba dive and love to kind of be out in the water. And sometimes depending on where you are in the world, or where you are, in the county, the colors are in the ocean can be different colors, and just like you said, I mean, there's just something kind of stunning about it that really you lose your breath for a second when you see it.
There's this Buddhist scripture, and it's just this very brief description of the Buddha, like sitting under a tree, experiencing this light breeze across his face, and him coming to the conclusion, yes, this is it right here.
I think that's a feeling that we should all aspire to experience more often than we probably do. I can't say every day, but that peace and tranquility.
Well, those moments are at best fleeting, but I think there's something to like touch in on, just to remember before we then get back to it.
Do you meditate? Do you meditate?
Not as often as I would like to, but yes, I do.
Yeah, I don't, and I should. My wife is more into mindfulness and peacefulness. I'm too busy just constantly going and don't take the time that I probably should to stop and reflect and appreciate.
We should have like just a 5-minute sit at some point to just do the thing for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, we actually did that at our wedding. Our wedding was on a Friday evening up in wine country, and we knew that a lot of our friends and family would be coming straight. Maybe they work a half day on Friday and then drive straight up to St. Helena, where we got married. And so it was my wife's idea to kind of start the ceremony with a not a 5-minute but a 2-minute probably meditation. Yep. And I thought it was kind of crazy when she first told me about it. Yep. And then it ended up being one of people's favorite parts of the whole wedding. So yeah.
And it's about connecting to that common whatever it is that is hard to put into name, that we all share and that we're all a part of, and the interconnectivity.
Right.
And I think that when we stop and are silent with what is, and especially when we're doing it together, somehow there's this intuitive interconnection that just kind of snaps into place.
Yeah.
helps us to continue on with the business. Maybe that's what you need to introduce legislature in Sacramento that after the Pledge of Allegiance, you all then sit in mindfulness meditation for 5 minutes.
So
this is on you.
I appreciate that. We do a prayer. We have a prayer at the beginning of every session, and for a couple of years, I think it was my first couple of years, it was a Buddhist monk, and then it was the monk's partner who did the prayer, and it was like that. I mean, it really did feel like they were typically shorter, 30 seconds, maybe a minute, but it did feel like a little bit of sort of meditation at the beginning of every session, and it was I really enjoyed that. I enjoy the person that we have now, but it's not quite the same as a Buddhist monk, taking you to a place of tranquility. Before you start, really diving deep into heavy conversations and heavy issues. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
It's helpful for me to know that our state lawmakers are taking whatever time they can to connect with something a little higher, a little deeper, regardless of how we may converse of the outcomes thereafter. So let's swing the pendulum back a little bit. Now, I think it might be interesting for the folks at home if you list absolutely every piece of legislation you introduced, and specifically by number, please. Okay, go.
So here's the secret. For everyone sitting at home. We don't know our bill numbers. We don't know. I know every bill and I know what it does, and I have zero idea what the bill number is. I for sure don't know other people's bill numbers. And so if you're passionate about an issue and you meet your state elected official, your assembly member, your state senator, their staffs, it never hurts to say the bill number, but then also follow up with what that bill does. Because people will come up and they'll be like, why didn't you vote for AB 746? I'm like, I have no idea what that bill was. But we also introduce I try to keep it to 20 bills a year. And I've been in the legislature for 7 years. So I've introduced over 140 bills. So I don't know if we've got the time to walk through each one.
We can extend it and make it a 3-hour edition. It's fine.
Perfect.
Everyone will want to stick around to watch it.
It's going to be like a PBS miniseries or something like that.
Call me Tygarjas Burns.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. But no, I mean, it's the opportunity to think up ideas either ourselves, to get ideas from the community, to work with advocacy organizations on things that are important to them, and then to craft that into a bill, try to move it through the legislative process and impact 39 million people, 39 million Californians, and sometimes more, because some of the bills that we do really set a new standard for the entire country. Is a cool opportunity. It's a really, really neat, it's a responsibility that we have and an opportunity that we have.
And frankly, if it's something like something that pertains to environment, if it winds up being a heavy one that might actually make an impact, that's something that can extend beyond California to the world.
Yes.
No pressure.
No, I appreciate that. Well, the governor was in China last week, which won't be last week when you watch the episode, but in the last week of October, meeting with Chinese government officials, talking about the environment, talking about climate change, and talking about the real opportunity that we have to be global leaders. So I think that's something, especially as you see more gridlock at the federal level. I think that's something that we internalize in California, is the responsibility and the obligation that we have to try to prove concepts, to try to show that, you're always told local government, state government, every level of government, people are often averse to change. And so when you try to do something, there's almost automatically going to be pushback, but we want to be able to show, no, we can be ambitious in our climate goals. We can really make protecting the environment a priority, and we can create jobs, and we can have a strong economy, and we can transition people from the old economy to the new economy to good paying jobs. So, that's definitely something that's always on our mind, and every year we get a dozen or 2 dozen pieces of legislation.
Well, let's start with just one. What's one that maybe it even got across the finish line that you're particularly proud of this year? Extra bonus points if you do know its number.
I'll go with 2 years ago instead of this year, and it was AB 1346.
Nice.
was a bill of mine. That to my point earlier, we nicknamed Green Machines because it's a lot easier to remember than AB 1346. And it was a bill that was signed into law, the hardest bill that I've run in the legislature, the hardest bill that I've authored, to ban the sale of gas-powered small off-road engines, which is a type of equipment, typically gas-powered leaf blowers, lawnmowers, other landscaping equipment, starting January 1st, 2024. So starting January 1st, 2024, gas-powered small off-road engine equipment cannot be sold in stores in California. And this was important for three reasons. One is the environmental impact and climate change. Your average leaf blower run for 1 hour, emits the same amount of smog-forming emissions, nitrous oxide, reactive organic gases, as a 2017 Toyota Camry that's driven for 1,100 miles.
No way.
Yeah. This equipment is terribly polluting.
Crazy.
Yep. 1 hour of the average, not the worst leaf blower on the market, the average gas-powered leaf blower, same amount of smog-forming pollutants emitted as a 2017 Camry from Sacramento to Denver.
Well, I know that like when I walk by somebody with a leaf blower of this nature, I definitely smell it.
Yeah.
And so that just, I'm a big believer in like, you have climate change deniers, which I still don't quite get, but I understand what it's like to think, okay, big picture is too big and it hurts my brain, I'm not getting it.
Yeah.
But it seems like what I can say is, well, do you notice all the poison we're throwing into the atmosphere, the water, the soil, and do you think that has absolutely no effect? And then like I'll take that tack and just shift a little bit.
Yeah.
So when I'm going by a leaf blower, I don't have these kind of stats in my nose, but I can smell it.
Yeah, it's right in your face, right?
Right.
It's very clear and apparent the toxicity of what's happening, and that's bad for the environment. Just think about how bad it is for the landscaping professional, right? The person who's got that on their back and they're using it 8, 10, 12 hours a day, 5, 6, 7 days a week, with the pollutants being emitted right next to their nose and their mouth. It creates terrible health impacts on our landscaping professionals. Lung cancer, asthma, early death. All of this there's data out there. It's all quantifiable that shows the impact that it has on landscaping professionals. And then the third area, which you also notice when you walk by it, is the noise.
Yeah.
And noise pollution also has real health impacts on us and on our communities. And so, and there are zero emission alternatives on the market that are quality comparable, and the cost is a bit of an issue. And so that's an area where I also got $30 million to help subsidize the transition, especially for small landscaping companies, to be able to purchase this zero emission equipment. It's a lot like electric vehicles, where the cost is a little higher up front. You save money over the long run because you don't have to buy gas, and they don't break down as often.
Right.
But there is a bit of an upfront cost, and that was something that talking with my colleagues, it was very important for us to focus on that and do everything that we could to alleviate that. $30 million is a good start. I need to go get more money in the budget, and that's something I've tried to do the last 2 years. I'm going to continue to do every year. Hopefully, we'll have a better budget year this year. But it's something that we have to do. But it's also something that we should be cognizant of the fiscal impact that it has on folks that can't necessarily afford that upfront cost. So that's what we're trying to help with.
Right, and that's a big hurdle, I feel like, for a lot of people is, okay, I want to do the right thing, but maybe I don't make as much as one of my neighbors.
1,000%.
Yeah. So I appreciate that you are cognizant of
Absolutely.
that and factoring that into the decision-making process.
Yeah.
So let's step away from that for a moment and go into early influences. Like, what inspired you to enter into the public service sphere?
It was kind of two things. The first was I grew up in Palo Alto. I was born in Texas. We moved to Palo Alto right before I turned 4. And growing up in Palo Alto in the 80s and early 90s, and having classmates from other communities. I also played soccer quite competitively, and so I had soccer teammates from other communities. It was clear to me that I was getting opportunities growing up in Palo Alto, going to Palo Alto public schools, some of the best in the state, amazing teachers, a safe community, access to world-class healthcare. And my friends didn't have those opportunities. And it wasn't anything, I didn't do anything right to deserve those opportunities that I was getting. My friends didn't do anything wrong to not get the opportunities that I was getting. And it seemed to me like that was a societal failure. And that was a societal failure that government should fix. And it's equality of opportunity. We're not going to have equality of results. But everybody, every kid, no matter if they grow up in Pacifica or Palo Alto or East Palo Alto or Stockton, should have the opportunity to go to good schools, should have the opportunity to live in a safe community where they can bike to the park without having to worry about violence, should have the ability to get stitched up when they need to. And I needed to get stitched up a lot when I was growing up. And so that was something that made me realize the inequities in and around where I was growing up. And then something that kind of made me interested in government. And then something that made it real, made it tangible, was my mom's uncle, my grand uncle, was a United States senator. He was a Republican senator from Minnesota, Uncle Rudy. He's still alive, Rudy Boschwitz. And Uncle Rudy being in politics made government and public service real. It wasn't just what other people did, it was what Uncle Rudy did, and that made it kind of more, that made it seem more possible for me when I was growing up as something to maybe get into one day.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
I know that as a checker who's also the mayor of a city,
Yeah.
I am very blessed that I get to experience people connecting with me. And I feel like a big part of the disconnect politically everywhere, you turn on any news, anything, I don't care what it is, and it's this feeling like we're disconnected from the people making the decisions. Mm-hmm. And I feel very blessed that, not that it's the easiest thing in the world to do, to walk that line and have that balance, but to be able to shake the hand or interact with my community every single day, mm-hmm. and be very transparent about who I am and mm-hmm. what I'm doing, and it's a blessing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a blessing. That's the blessing and the challenge of local government. Is you are on the ground. It's funny because the joke is you run into your constituents at the grocery store. You definitely run into your constituents at the grocery store because you're working at the grocery store.
Right.
And I would say that as you get higher up, quote unquote, in public office, you do feel further removed from that. And so especially when the legislative session is happening in Sacramento, and I'm spending half of my week every week for 9 months in Sacramento, there are times when I feel disconnected from the district, and I kind of miss that. And so. Then I'll go to the grocery store, or I'll go to the restaurant, and in this community, in this district, no one's shy
no, we are not.
About coming up and saying hi. So anytime you don't feel grounded, they'll get you grounded real fast.
Oh yeah.
So and if it's not a constituent, my mom will get me grounded real fast, who's also a constituent. So yeah, but it's so important. Those interactions, those organic interactions that you have with your constituents outside of we came up to Pacifica about a month ago and had a wonderful community coffee. Thank you for co-hosting that with me.
Oh, thank you. That was great.
Yeah, which was fantastic. But it's also important to have the informal interactions that just kind of organically happen when you're out and about. So yeah.
Absolutely. It's appreciated. So tell me something about the legislation this year. I don't know, what were you working on?
This year, I had a couple of big bills. So I've done a lot in the higher education space, but this year actually I had two really big bills in K through 12 education, one of which we were successful and one of which we're going to have to come back next year and try again. The one where we were successful, and see, I have no idea what the bill number is, not a clue, but it is to integrate media literacy into K through 12 education in California, and to integrate it into the core subject areas, math, science, history, and English. So not having a standalone course, but having media literacy be a part of courses that students take starting in kindergarten. Because kids these days, they're digital natives, right? They're on their phone, they're on their computer. They're not, when we were growing up, we got our news from the local broadcast channel, the local community channel, or the local news or the newspaper. Now they're getting a lot of their news other than from Mayor Bigstyck's monthly TV show. They're getting it from TikTok and YouTube and Twitter or X. And we need, and there's so much misinformation out there. There's so much.
Are we really calling it X now, by the way?
I'm not. I should
Is that
know.
where we are? Or
I
is that
should.
we're finally like, oh, it's X?
Yeah, even better. I actually haven't even updated my app, so it still says Twitter, and I still get they keep on making changes to the app, and it's not impacting me because I haven't updated the new one. I should probably get off of it completely. That's a whole different conversation. But to that point, we need to make sure that young people are more critical consumers of all of this stuff that they're being inundated with.
Right.
And that's media literacy, is making sure that they understand, making sure they can tell the difference between an advertisement and an organic post, making sure that they understand the long-term ramifications of stuff that they put on the internet, and how that could impact their getting a job one day, or their reputation, and so media literacy is so important for our youth. And then I joke with folks that I wish I could force parents to take it too.
Yeah, right.
I think a lack of media literacy leads to conspiracy theories around COVID. It leads to the January 6th attack on our nation's capital. These are real things that happen in the real world because of things that people read online and read on social media. And so that was a kind of an important bill that I think is going to be really beneficial for our students moving forward. The second had to do with computer science. It's a longer story. We'll save it for another day. But at its core, it's making sure California is behind now it's 31, behind 31 other states when it comes to teaching computer science in our schools. California, the home of Silicon Valley, is behind 31 other states when it comes to...
We are computers. How in the heck did we fall to 31?
Let me turn this around on you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
What percentage of high school students in California, do you think have access to computer science? Not that they have to take it, but that they have the opportunity to take it.
I do not know.
60%. Only 60% of high school students in California go to high schools that even give them the opportunity to take a computer science course. That's insane.
I feel like we're hearkening back to some of your motivations about disparities and opportunity.
That's exactly right, because it's predominantly the communities of color. It's predominantly the rural communities. It's predominantly the lower socioeconomic communities that aren't, and those students that aren't getting access to computer science. And then what happens? They don't get access to computer science. They don't get the skills they need to get good paying jobs. And it just, the whole cycle exacerbates itself. And so, this is something that we should be embarrassed by. I'm embarrassed by it. I've been working on it for my entire time in the legislature. And frankly, I'm pissed off that we weren't successful on this effort this year. I'm very disappointed in one colleague in particular who had the ability to stop the bill single-handedly. It's the least democratic part of the democratic process. It's called the Appropriations Committee, and the chairs of the Appropriations Committee have a lot of power to do things unilaterally.
I think Josh referred to it as like the black box part of the process.
It is the black box part of the process. And so that's where this bill died on the Senate side. It made it all the way to the second to last step, and it died. But we're going to come back next year. I'm already talking with advocates about it, because it's just inexcusable that California is so far behind.
And do you talk to that colleague in particular to try? Like, I appreciate that inherently there's that in the horse you rode in on kind of a sensibility. But like, after you get past that, is it okay, if you're the guy I need to convince, do I start working on my relationship with you and having a conversation, figuring out where we can actually meet our minds?
It's a great question.
Find where it's like we have the common interest at heart?
It's a great question. Absolutely. In this situation, I think there will probably be a different senator in that position next year.
Yay!
And so I'm not dedicating too much time to
with no respect to the other one, but yay.
Yeah, and I have a relationship with him. I've been waiting to see him in person to have that conversation, kind of in person about, hey man, what was that about? What happened there? Why? Sadly, with the Appropriations Committee, often they won't actually give you a good reason, and that can be very frustrating. Yeah. But I'll wait to see who the next Senate Appropriations Chair is, and then I'll start that conversation with them very early to educate them on how far behind California is, educate them on the impacts this is having in communities of color, in rural communities, and just hopefully, and I'm going to work on getting money in the budget so that it's my job to take away their excuses for stopping the bill. Right. And so, it's many efforts take multiple bites at the apple. That's just a part of the process. And so, but I happen to be doggedly persistent in general, and especially when it comes to equity and education. And this is an important issue on that front.
And frankly, from the first time I ever heard you speak about anything, and I don't remember if it was at like City Dems when you were just doing a meet for the first time, or I think that might be what it was. And I was struck immediately by your enthusiasm.
Appreciate it.
You really seem to love what you do, and you really seem to be advocating for what you believe in.
Yeah.
And your heart really seems to be in it.
Yeah, I'm glad. I appreciate you noticing that. And sometimes that can get me in trouble. They say that one of the first rules of this job is don't fall in love with your bills. Yep. Of course, I'm going to fall in love with my bills, especially when they're bills to help people that really need help. Right. And so I don't have a lot of patience for people that I think are opposing things for bad reasons. And I can't say that that's the case with this bill. That's been the case in the past with certain other efforts. And you gotta, I love this job. It's a lot of work. And so if you're not passionate about it, I imagine it's miserable. I don't know what that feels like because I'm passionate about it. But it's, and we only get to do it for a finite period of time. And so that helps dedicate everything you've got to it. For the 12 years that you can serve.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, let's talk about something a little bit less legislatory, and just talk about you for a minute. And you've told us about some of your motivation getting into public life, but in general, what are some of your early motivations? Maybe a story from when you grew up, or what you thought you were going to do before you got into public service, or
sure, yeah, and
family
it's kind
life,
of
whatever.
What's that?
Family life, whatever.
It's funny, kind of going along with the education theme. That well, first of all, I failed a lot. And that's something that I try to talk about, especially when I talk to younger people, is failing, and trying to learn from that failure and bounce back and make the best of the position that you're in. And so, when I was growing up, I went to Palo Alto High School in Palo Alto. It's right across the street from Stanford. A third of the class applies to Stanford. Probably 10% of the class goes to Stanford. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy, and the pressure that it puts on young people is crazy. And I was senior class president, and I played on the soccer team, and all these things. And I still got rejected by 7 of the 9 colleges that I applied to. And I ended up, for my freshman year of college, going to Emory University in Atlanta, which I hadn't even heard of when I started the kind of college application process. But they actually sent me a letter highlighting that was where President Carter had the Carter Center, talking about all the different elected officials that had gone through there. And I was like, oh, what is this place? I'm intrigued. And I wanted to get away from California for undergrad, at least. Yeah. Growing up in Silicon Valley, it's a bubble. My dad is from South Africa. My mom is from Wisconsin. It's important to get away and experience new and different places. And so I went to Emory in Atlanta for a year. I happened to get better grades at Emory than I ever got in high school. And so I used that to transfer to Georgetown, which is where I'd wanted to go the whole time, but got rejected my senior year of high school. And then when I was at Georgetown, when I was graduating, I wanted to do Teach for America. I wanted to go teach in a underprivileged community, either a rural community, an inner city community. I didn't really care, and I got the small envelope. I made it past the first round of interviews, and then I got rejected. And I was like, that wasn't part of my plan. Like I just assumed that I was going to go do that, and then maybe go into policy or go into law school. Who knows? And so that kind of started me down this path where I worked on U.S. Senate races and a governor's race for 3 years. And so I went from growing up in Palo Alto, living in Washington, D.C., to moving to South Dakota. And 2 weeks after I graduated from college, I was living in Pierre, South Dakota. Pronounced Pierre, spelled Pierre, P-I-E-R-R-E, the capital of South Dakota. Yep. And I had more culture shock at first living in South Dakota than I did studying abroad in Florence. I mean, it was so different than any place I'd ever lived at in the world. But I dove into it. I loved it. I ended up going back 2 years later to be a regional director, to be a manager of field organizers for this campaign, and it gave me the chance to live in and experience cultures that and communities that I never would in the Bay Area or on the East Coast, and so that also helped me understand that, and I wrote an op-ed for it in the Palo Alto Weekly back in 2004. That we have a lot more similarities than we have differences, and there are people out there that want to exacerbate the small differences that we have, for personal, political, business gain, whatever their motivations. But at the end of the day, we all want to live in a safe community. We all want to have what's best for our family. We all want to see people around us be safe and secure and happy, and so trying to focus on what brings us together can be a lot stronger than constantly trying to jam us apart, which was happening a lot back then and is happening even more now.
Right. Similarly, out of high school, I went to school at Tulane University in New Orleans, and a big chunk of the reason why, frankly, I refused to be a part of the Democratic Party, and I'm not a part of any party to make.
We've talked about that before. Yeah,
I'm very disciplined in this principle. I feel like the second I join a party, then I lose credibility on some level that I'm actually listening to what anybody has to say. And having had that very visceral experience of going to school in Louisiana, where a lot of people going to Tulane are from Louisiana, and not having a conversation with the pundit on the television, but with somebody who's motivated for all the right reasons to come to a conclusion that's different than the one I've come to, and then to be able to talk about, oh, okay, this is the thing we're concerned about, and maybe we can talk about the concern, and from there start extrapolating how to address it and come to a common solution, rather than just fixate on, oh, my philosophy is right versus your philosophy is right, which doesn't solve the problem, along with then making our relationship nothing to write home about.
Yeah, and it's about listening, and active listening, and actually and empathizing, and really trying to understand what is the core of your concern or your life experience that's leading you to this place, and once you do that, I think it creates a lot of opportunity for agreement as opposed to disagreement.
Right.
Yeah.
And so as I'm seeking harmony, in whatever position, frankly, I'm taking, and I'm very grateful that, at least for the moment, the fine people of Pacifica allowed me in this position.
Yeah.
But whether it's, as an elected official or just going about my everyday life, trying to harmonize where I find discord. And that means I don't play this which team am I on game. And if I accidentally start going in that direction, I try and course correct really quickly. Because it's important to me that I'm always coming to it from the human level. what's your human experience that's causing this discord for you? Can I notice that? Can I relate to it? And can I address it from a place of relation, knowing that generally speaking, most of what we experience is a common thing. It's not a different thing.
Yep, totally agree. And that can, you have to put more into those interactions, right? It can't be so surface level. It can't be so black and white. But I think it creates the environment for a lot better end result.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Okay, so I think you said something about a higher education bill that...
I love higher education. I love higher education. I love pushing the status quo. And so I've focused a lot on... So when you get elected to the legislature, the Speaker of the Assembly says to you, what committees do you want to serve on? And you provide 6 different committees. You know, you rank the top 6 committees that you want to serve on. And higher education was one of my top 3. I didn't get any of my top 3. And so what I did was I created a select committee on, essentially on higher education, on California's 1960 master plan for higher education. Select committees do not hear bills, but we can have hearings, informational hearings, bring experts together, bring students together, talk about what's impacting them, and try to identify policy.
And can you just convene your own select committee whenever you want to?
You have to get approval from the speaker.
Okay.
Usually you can only have 1 at a time. I was one of a few people to have 2 for a certain amount of time because I had my select committee on the 1960 Master Plan for Higher Education. And then I was, at the time, chair of the elections committee. And so I was also asked to create a select committee on the census when we were going through the census process in 2020 and for the couple years before that. And so, yes, you ask the speaker for permission to create a select committee. You get colleagues to join the select committee. And then, to be honest, a lot of select committees don't do anything. It's sort of for show, you could say.
Oh.
It just depends on the member and what they really want to do, or do they get distracted by other things.
By virtue of the fact that you're bringing it up, that immediately lends gravitas to your select committee. And
we did a ton of, yeah, we held, the first 2 years, we held 5 hearings all across the state. We had 2 in Sacramento, 1 in San Jose, 1 in Fresno, 1 in Riverside, to bring together higher education stakeholders, from students to administrators to faculty to staff, to accounting and finance people, to talk about kind of the higher education landscape and try to figure out what are some of the obstacles that are stopping students from success. And from that, we've passed a lot of legislation, mainly focused on community college students, and helping community college students, with their basic needs. The level of homelessness and housing insecurity amongst community college students in California is staggering. A study was done 4 years ago that showed that 19% of California community college students had experienced some period of homelessness in the 12 months before they took the survey.
Wow.
19% of community college students, 10% of CSU students, 5% of UC students. And this was in 2019. My understanding is it's gotten worse in the past 4 years. So focusing on basic needs for community college students, also focusing on them transferring, their ability to transfer from community college to a 4-year institution. Our transfer rates in California are embarrassing, and are an area where we need to focus a lot more. What are the unnecessary obstacles that are stopping students from transferring, from getting their bachelor's or from getting their associate's degree, transferring to a 4-year institution? Helping student parents. We had a bill last year to provide, because, oh shucks, and now I forget the data off the top of my head, but it's something like a quarter of higher education students in California. That might be too high. A remarkably large amount of higher education students in California are parents. And as parents, they have different kind of pressures and responsibilities, and so giving them priority registration so that they can get the classes at the times that they need to be able to get their degrees. Making sure that every campus has a resource, has a website, a web page that they can go to for all the different resources that exist for student parents. This year, what was my higher education? It might have been more focused on, financial aid. So we had a bill this year around financial aid, and community colleges, mainly community colleges in California, were being more strict than the federal requirements for the ability for students to keep their financial aid.
That really surprises me.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. If we
Aren't we liberal California where we prize education and yada yada?
And a lot of these requirements actually were created 30, 40 years ago when it wasn't quite as liberal California.
Gotcha.
And some of them make sense. It makes sense to have, certain, they call it satisfactory academic performance standards. But let's take into account like lived experience. Let's take into account that a student might have a health issue, or they might lose their job, or they might have a parent who passes away, or a sibling who, whatever. And let's let that lived experience be a part of the appeals process, where they can try to prove, hey, this was an anomaly. This weird life experience happened that caused me to focus less on school and more on my life obligations and responsibilities. But I'm committed. I want to stay in school. Let me show that that was an anomaly. But once you take the financial aid away, the odds increase exponentially that the student's going to drop out.
Right.
And once they drop out, it's almost guaranteed they're not going to go back. And so, let's stop them from dropping out in the first place. So it's been a lot of really neat higher education efforts to help students who are kind of struggling the most. And it's also from a bit of a selfish perspective, because California's economy needs these students to get their degrees and get the jobs that we're creating in California. We need them for multiple reasons, as you know. Rather than importing talent from other states or other countries, if we have the ingrown talent that can take those jobs, then it doesn't put as much pressure on our housing stock, for example. Right. The more that the students can get their degrees, get good paying jobs, they pay more taxes, which are good for local government, it's good for state government. So, it benefits everybody for more California students to get their associate's degree, to get their bachelor's degree, and to get into the workforce with a lot of the jobs that we're creating already here in California.
I think that's awesome. And again, your passion really comes through as you're discussing education, which as somebody who's getting to know you, it's really helpful to see that passion and what you are bringing to our community and what you're bringing to the work that would hopefully translate to our community.
Appreciate it.
I know that the time is starting to run down a bit. Is there something you'd like to address that I haven't asked about yet? Is there a question that I'm not asking that you feel like, hey, all of Pacifica or even beyond, this is a thing I really want you to know?
Yeah, I guess another area, I mentioned briefly that I chaired the elections committee. I chaired the elections committee for 5 years, my first 5 years in the Assembly. I now chair a committee called the Business and Professions Committee. I have the opportunity with the elections committee to work a lot on increasing access to the ballot. And so I guess I'm gonna look to the camera. One thing that I would say to Pacifica residents is, I don't care if you vote for me or not, just vote. You're going to have an election. Is there anything on the ballot in Pacifica in November?
Not this November.
No. So you're going to have an election in March. The primary is going to be early March. Then you're going to have another election next November. There's going to be important local government elections. There's going to be important state and federal elections. I don't care who you vote for. Just vote. And I've done a lot to try to make that easier. Actually, in San Mateo County, you already got a ballot in the mail. San Mateo County was one of the pilot counties for testing that out. I authored a bill to make that statewide, so California is a permanent vote-by-mail state. I also authored the law back in 2018 to create the Where's My Ballot tracking system, so you can track your ballot through the mail like it's an Amazon package. And if you haven't, you have to sign up for that. If you haven't signed up, I encourage you to sign up for it. It increases transparency in our voting system, and my hope is that that increases faith in our elections. And because we have some of the most secure elections in the country, in the world. But our democracy is only as good as the percentage of people who participate in it. And so it's really important for everybody to participate. That's just something that I've gotten very passionate about over my, really, for longer than just serving in the Assembly, but definitely while I've been in the Assembly. So, I could get on my soapbox about that for half an hour, but I know we don't have that much time.
We have about 4 minutes.
There it is. All right, then I'll stop there.
Well, you can be on your soapbox for no, but it's especially as one of the higher level topics in our country lately has been trust in elections. I'm really proud of the work we do in California, and what's occurring to me as I'm listening to you is it seems like a cure for cynicism could be, well, have you dug into how it works? Do you know where that envelope comes from? Do you know where it goes? Do you know who receives it and what they do with it? And how that whole process goes, and all the checks and balances that are put in place every step in the way.
Exactly.
And the consideration that's been put in.
Yeah.
One of my deepest frustrations in this life is the way people use the term bureaucrat. Because once upon a time, by the way, before I ever had any interest in becoming a political anything, I was barely interested in politics on any level. And I, through the death of a friend, met his sister, who was a Sacramento bureaucrat at the time. And I got to hear her perspective and experience on being a bureaucrat and what she actually does and the processes she goes through. And it's like, no, bureaucrats are kind of like government scientists, the way they are taking into consideration everything they possibly can to inform good policy, good practice, and how it will ultimately unfold in a way where it can't go wrong. And so here's to the bureaucrats, really, because I get it. We don't like processes that take forever. And as we know in government, if you know how to watch a pot of water literally boil, then maybe this is the spectator sport for you. And otherwise, it really does take a long time, and often for good reasons, and often we do want to speed it up. But without somebody saying, well, hey, look, here's the ramification.
Exactly. You speed it up and you lose some of that accountability. You lose some of that, people want their government resources to be spent responsibly. Part of that means slowing down a little bit and moving methodically. And I know that frustrates folks. That frustrates me sometimes. But if you lose that, then you're going to get more waste. Then you're going to get more kind of inefficiencies. And then people are going to get mad about that. So
when you're talking about policy that affects 39 million people. On the local level, I figured out that I can't make a policy decision that's not going to upset one of my 40,000 people. Let alone, it's hard for me to conceive what it looks like trying to do our best for 39 million. I know that you just came off a trip. You slept on the couch so as not to disturb your wife.
That's right.
And made it a point to arrive here so that we could have this conversation, which I personally really enjoyed.
Me too.
It's always a pleasure to engage with the passion you have around the work you're doing.
Appreciate it.
And I'm so deeply grateful that you would take the time to be with us here today and to tell us about who you are, the work you're doing, and why it is I think we should all be very grateful to have you as our representative.
Well, thank you for having me. Looking forward to a lot more conversations and a lot more trips to Pacifica soon.
And I'm looking forward to having you here as you do. Thank you so much, Mr. Marc Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Bigstyck. Appreciate it.